So welcome. I really appreciate you all coming this evening. I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about sort of a broad topic, but also a relevant and popular one, which is, what does it mean to do something that's spiritual? And specifically within the context of Zen, right? Because obviously there's a lot of definitions to that, and typically when people come to a Zen center, they have at least some interest in spiritual things, and I always say, if you find something here that resonates, please keep coming. And if this encourages you to move towards something that resonates elsewhere, then go do that. Um, we don't own any specific territory with respect to this, but there's a word in Zen which is bodhicitta, and it means the aspiration for enlightenment, right? Or the inward drive to wake up. And the way we think about it in this tradition is that everyone has that, and that everyone is already enlightened. So there's nothing to attain. There's no thing that I'm going to give you that's going to cause the clouds to open, and then everything going forward is going to be radically transformed as you pass through the world in an unending state of nirvana. That's not a thing. When I say that's not a thing, I really mean it. Like, there's one of you in this room, and you know who you are, who I was talking to in Daesan about the fact that I had some challenging things happen at work, and I had some negative emotion come up, and I started spiraling. And then my wife was like, "You're spiraling." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I really am. I'm so sorry." My point being is that we don't ever escape having a human mind. Right? We don't ever escape, and we want to. Like the Buddha said that we suffer because of desire, right? So the desire that all of us have, and perhaps I'm misspeaking, it's never great to speak for everyone, but I think in this case I'm right, is to move away from suffering and toward feeling better, toward greater states of success, of stability, of freedom and relaxation. And so as we attempt to move toward those things, we formulate plans. And those plans that we formulate are intended to relieve suffering and create more favorable circumstances. And I'm in favor of that. Like, you should do that. And it will ultimately not produce a final answer. Like the next job, the next relationship, the right amount of money in your savings account, all of those things are going to end up being impermanent. Right? The state of our reality is that nothing is fixed. So nothing external is fixed. Right? Everything transitions from one thing to another thing over time. I used to have hair, now I don't. Right? And also, those things, those constructions that we carry around within ourselves that we think are selves are also not fixed or permanent. Right? So the Buddha taught that there is no fixed self. And that is the key to the freedom that the enlightenment of the Buddha is attempting to reveal, not only within the historical teacher, but within all of us. And so when we sit, because Zen is the school of Buddhism that emphasizes meditation, we look at what comes up. And part of what we're aiming at, if you can be said to be aiming at anything, is that we're allowing ourselves to experience ourselves as we really are. Because there's the mind stream, right? There's all of our thoughts and perceptions and identities. And when things affirm our sense of self, then we feel good. And when things don't agree with our sense of self, then we feel anger or resentment or feel hurt. But it doesn't have to be that way. So when we talk about spirituality in the context of Zen, what we're talking about is studying the self. The thing that makes Zen spiritual is that it's the process of allowing everything to be exactly as it is. And the reason we sit is to learn underneath all of the noise, who are we? Like, what is this thing that we are, this bag of skin that walks around and does things? And if we don't assign a fixed meaning to it, what is it? What does it mean? How do we function with it? What do we do with it? How do we be of benefit to others? Because Zen is a Mahayana path, and the Mahayana Buddhist path cares about not only my own enlightenment, but everyone else's. Right? The Bodhisattva vow is, I agree to continue to serve until everyone is enlightened. Well, that's impossible. So what are we saying? We're saying I'm going to try to be a benefit to others, which naturally arises when we get out of our own way. The example I always use is like, if you came into the Zen center and you heard a baby crying in the closet, you wouldn't sit down and form a discussion group to decide what to do. The naturally arising movement would be, well, let's open up the closet and get the baby. What's going on? Why is there a baby in the closet? Let's save the baby, right? So it's easy to be spontaneous in a crisis situation, and it's easy to let the ego drop away and all of our mental constructions and emotions and let it all fall away and just spring into action when there's a novel crisis, right? But fortunately or unfortunately, the way our brains are constructed, over the lifespan, we develop patterns. And we develop those patterns to try to move away from suffering and move toward, and I don't like to say pleasure, right? Because it's not, sometimes we're just trying to move toward peace. Sometimes we're just trying to move toward safety. Sometimes we're just trying to move toward, getting out of a dangerous situation. But whatever we're trying to move towards, it's okay to move towards things, and it's not the answer. If the answer is over the horizon, you'll never get there. Because when you reach that horizon, you're just going to look out to the next horizon. The answer is right here. You already have it. And that's like the good news and the bad news, right? Because I can do a bunch of things that will engage your nervous system in a way that you will feel inspired. And then you can, you see this with like all of the talk about like manifesting and setting intentions, right? And it's like, if I just control all of my thoughts and set my intentions correctly, then I'll manifest all the things that I want. And when all of my desires are fulfilled, I'll be happy. It's like, yeah, but then what if like when that happens, the next day your mom dies in a car crash? Like, first of all, difficulties are always a part of human existence, and you can't think your way, you can't control all of your thoughts. You can't, so now we're shaming people because they can't control all of their thoughts, which is impossible. Well, if you were just, you just need to think the pot. No, it's impossible. I've been meditating for almost 30 years. You cannot control your thoughts. Right? What you can do is you can watch them. You can step out of the mind stream and you can let them go by, and there they go. And you cannot be carried along by them. You cannot be hijacked by them, and that is way better. Right? I would much rather be a mindful pauper than a mindless millionaire. Right? Not that, we're not trying to make any statements here about money or not having money or any of that. All I'm trying to say is the torture that we create in our mind is by far the most painful torture we can create. And so the way we experience freedom from that is by sitting, and when we call it taking refuge. When we sit, and I really mean it, like, do it every day. I do, it helps, right? Sit, let the thoughts come up. We do this in ideal circumstances, right? We practice the spiritual path, the path of the Buddha, in ideal circumstances. It's quiet, it's a pleasant atmosphere, there's nice cushions, right? Everyone is supportive, right? And we do that so that we can carry that practice into the world where it isn't like that. Because my baggage is going to start interacting with the baggage of everyone else. My life experiences in history and expectations and the bad experience that I had that I've never, you can't talk to me like that anymore, right? whatever that constellation of things is that I carry, is going to start interacting with all the people in my life. And if I don't have the capacity to sort of recognize that that's not fixed, it's not permanent, and it's not who I am, then I'm powerless over it. Which means that, when my irritating loved one at the Thanksgiving table behaves in a manner that I don't enjoy, then I'm going to become triggered and I'm going to start behaving in a manner no one enjoys either. And the reason I don't want to do that is because I don't want to be controlled by anyone else. I want to be free. But in order to be free, we have to let go of the sense of self that has to be defended. And when we do that, we don't suddenly flop down like, a toy doll with no spine, right? We don't become like my analogy's falling apart, but it's okay. What I'm imagining is someone who just has no bones, right? They're just like, bleh. Like we don't collapse. Right? We don't collapse when we let go. In fact, we just can be present. So then, like the tide of someone else's behavior can, like the ocean can like flow in and flow out. And you can watch it and go, look at that. That was really obnoxious. And there it goes. Right? That's what we're practicing when we sit. Right? We're letting things go by and we're seeing them, acknowledging them, including our emotions. Right? There's anger. Right? There's grief. There's joy. Right? We can allow all of the things. Free from any story, free from any fixed definition. Doesn't mean anything about you. If you feel tired and you rest, it doesn't mean you're lazy. If you work really hard, it doesn't mean you're a workaholic, right? There's a need we have as human beings to tell a story about who we are and what we're doing and what it means. It doesn't have to mean anything. It can just be what it is. Because it already is that. What is already is. And so when we look to the future or the past to try to create the meaning in our life, then our meaning has either passed us by or it's delayed in the future. No. Have the meaning right now. Right? The spiritual meaning is right here. Just being skillful with what's directly in front of you. Think about how rapidly our brains want to tell a story. If you've ever had a roommate or a partner and lived with them and like there's dirty dishes in the sink, like immediately our whole being can tell a whole story about that. Oh my God, I'm so lazy I didn't do the dishes. Oh my God, they're such a slob, they didn't do the dishes. I can't, you never do the dishes. Why is it always my turn to do this? Like all this. And I'm not proposing that in, cohabiting relationships, it's not okay to have boundaries and to have discussions about chores and all the things that can be appropriate. I've lived in Zen communities and we definitely had to do that too, right? Had to talk about who takes out the trash and who cleans up and who makes the meals, all the things, right? But it doesn't have to have a story that goes with it. Right? We can just accept people exactly where they are and be like, oh. Because I don't know about you, but when my brain hijacks me and I start telling stories about the things in my life, hijackers never take me to a place I want to be, right? No one hijacks the plane and takes it to Disneyland, right? They hijack the plane, they take it somewhere you don't want to go. That's why it's hijacking, right? So when my brain hijacks me, I always end up negative thoughts, blaming others, self-justifying, figuring out why the other person deserves the mistreatment that I'm offering. And what all of that does is it inhibits our ability to express compassion. Because there's a version of reality where you say to someone, I noticed that you have completely stopped washing the dishes over the last few weeks. Are you okay? And then what arises out of that? But ultimately, this path is not about a solution in the sense of a particular thing, right? Because what arises out of that is whatever arises out of that. Right? Sometimes we act compassionate, and what arises is that the person is hateful. And sometimes what arises is that they're compassionate back, right? So one of the things that I struggle with is sometimes you'll go to like a mindfulness workshop, and they'll talk about all the benefits of mindfulness, and it's benefits like what I just described. Like, oh, well, if you are more mindful and more present with your partner, then you'll have less conflict. And that's usually true. And that's another fixed position, right? If I'm mindful all the time, then I'll get this result out of others. It's like, no. I mean, maybe, but that's not the point, right? I'm going to take responsibility for what, that's why, ultimately this is an individual practice. We're all alone on the cushion together, right? We're supporting each other to be alone on the cushion together. Because each of us, our spiritual path is different. That's why there's individual instruction, is because each person is different, each journey is different. But we're all, on this path, we're all moving towards the ability to drop in to that place where there are no fixed positions, where everything is free of any fixed characteristic and is allowed to be what it is, right? The way we say it is form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So that's tricky, right? So what does that mean, right? It's like, well, form is emptiness, meaning that everything changes. Right? We grow old, we have different aspirations, children grow up. We think one way at one time and a different way at another time, right? Form is emptiness. It's not fixed. Emptiness is also form, right? Everything comes into being and takes a form, right? We need a meditation posture and a place to practice because, it's ridiculous to say I don't have a form. Like, hi, here I am. There you are. It's like saying you don't have a self, right? Which I've already said in this talk, right? You don't have a self. You don't have a fixed self. Well, that's absurd, right? When I pay my taxes, right, they don't update your account. I do have, I have the experience of being an individual being. But the thing is just, it's an experience. Right? You can acknowledge that we have this perception that we're all separate and that I'm an individual thing, disconnected from everything else. And I have a whole set of stories about that, but it actually isn't entirely true. We're actually all interconnected, right? Everything that I do affects everyone else through thousands of connections. We all learned this when we study environmental science in like 6th grade, right? Like the water cycle, there's thousands of examples, but everything's interconnected. And I'm not fixed. And that, I keep coming back to that because that is the key freedom that practice gives us. That when we sit, we can watch as all of the versions of me arise and dissipate, arise and dissipate. And then I can make decisions about what to do. And then the last thing I'll say is the natural result of of attempting to not participate in the it's all about me project, right? So the general project of the ego is it's all about me, right? And even like, enough about me, what do you think about me, right? Seeking approval, avoiding disapproval, seeking success, avoiding failure, all the things we do, none of which are necessarily wrong, but which are just not the end. They're not the finish line. Not of a spiritual life anyway. Right? I have a friend who's a Benedictine monk, and he says, I can summarize the order of Benedict like this. Sit down, shut up. It's not about you. Get back to work. And he's a little bit sarcastic. He's a good guy. He's Brazilian. Has a bit of a flair for dramatic ways of putting things. But I love that, right? Sit down on the cushion. Be quiet. realize it's not all about you. It's okay, right? You don't have to figure everything out. Just be with what is. Try it when you're frustrated. Just come back, be present. Now what? And then get back to work, right? Get back to service, get back to helping. The dishes are dirty, clean the dishes. If the floor needs to be vacuumed, vacuum the floor. Don't tell a story about it. Just look around. Like, look at your life. There's stuff that needs doing. We call that samu, right? Enlightened work, or meditative work. Like when we wash the dish, we just wash the dish. Right? When we vacuum the floor, we just vacuum the floor. When we type the email, we just type the email. My first trip to Zen Mountain Monastery, I was like probably 21, 22, something like that. And I just started doing Zen. I've been meditating for like 3 months, and I got to go to this monastery, and Zen Mountain Monastery is like serious Zen. Like, they've got the vibe working. It's the architecture and the robes and there's many, many monks, and it's vibing and chanting, and the chanting is loud, and it's incredibly inspiring, right? And I had these images in my head of like, well, when it comes time for work practice during the day, that all the monks are going to be doing all these like traditionally seeming Japanesey historical monk things, right? They'll be pulling weeds and sweeping and raking and polishing the wind, Well, turns out all the retreat participants did all that. All of the monks like vanished into these cubicles and started answering emails for people in the community. This is like 1996. Email was still pretty new back then, but yeah, and I'm just looking at all these people, and I'm like, that kind of look like I look now, right? Shaved heads and the whole thing, and